Bet horse racing on DRF Bets. We'll match your first deposit of $200. Get free expert picks and past performances, plus weekly cash back. All from DailyRacingForm, the most trusted name in horse racing.
Hey everyone, I'm David Aragona here for another edition of the TimeformUS Road to the Derby series. The focus this week is Arkansas out at Oaklawn Park. They are running the Grade 3 Southwest Stakes as their feature race on Saturday. This one offering 20 Kentucky Derby qualifying points to the winner of that race. And this feels like when the Arkansas Road to the Derby really kicks into full swing. They did run the Smarty Jones earlier this month, but this is when we start to get the shippers coming in to scoop up these Derby points. And we do have a pretty high-profile shipper running in this race, and you can see that when we throw up the field of 9 runners for this Southwest Stakes, there is a pretty heavy favorite on the morning line, the number 6 Arabian Night, listed at even money, and he is the one that all eyes will be on in this race, coming in for the Bob Baffert stable. Now, obviously, he can't win those 20 points going out for the Bob Baffert barn. He's not eligible to win points going out while he's still being trained by Baffert at this point, but can definitely increase his credentials moving forward to that Kentucky Derby, and I think a lot of people expect this horse to pass this test with flying colors based on how impressive he was in that career debut at Keeneland. But he's facing a pretty high quality field here. There's a lot of depth in this Southwest from top to bottom. You've got 3 runners from the Brad Cox stable that is facing off against Arabian Night. Those are the number 2 Corona Bolt, the number 3 Jace's Road, and the number 8 Hit Show. You've got a Steve Asmussen runner, a couple from Ken McPeek's barn, including an impressive maiden winner last out. So there's a lot going on in the Southwest. We're going to talk about all of it in just a little bit. But before we get to those individual contenders, let's take a look at the TimeformUS pace projector for this race. And not a big surprise when you scroll through the running styles in this field that fast pace flag is showing up here. And again, not a big surprise that the horse that is supposed to be leading through those quick fractions is the number 6 Arabian Night. He showed a lot of speed, especially gate speed, on his debut at Keeneland, so he's one that you would expect to be in front on this stretch out to the 1.16 distance. But both of those Brad Cox runners drawn towards the inside also possess speed, the number 2 and number 3. And I'd also keep my eye on the number 5 Frosted Departure. He's a long shot in this race, but is one of 2 going out for the Ken McPeek barn. And kind of interesting that he's stretching back out in this race. I wonder if he's in here to ensure a quicker pace for McPeek's other runner, the number 1 Sun Thunder, because Frosted Departure looks a little bit tough to make as a contender in this race on his own merits. And before we get to those contenders, let's also take a look at a new feature in TimeformUS. That is the finish projector. You can check this out by going to your DRF mobile PPs and tapping on that TimeformUS tab. And the finish projector basically is a visual representation of the TimeformUS power picks that you might be familiar with from the classic TimeformUS PPs. It's just the TimeformUS algorithm selecting the most likely winner of this race. And you can see pretty clearly here, it is pointed out as the number 6 Arabian Night over the number 3 Jace's Road, one of those Brad Cox trainees. They are the 2 coming in with the best last out speed figures, but do take note of that number 7 Red Root Run, who does have that late pace flag attached to his chiclet, and that is because he has the best late pace rating of any runner in this field according to TimeformUS, and that could come into play if this pace really does come apart at the end. Typically, horses that do have that best late pace rating are successful in situations where the pace does come apart. So let's go through these main contenders, and we're going to begin with that heavy favorite, the number 6 Arabian Night, and we'll take a look at the replay of his debut race at Keeneland. Remember, this was a Breeders' Cup weekend, and he really started off that Saturday card with a bang, winning this race by over 7 lengths. He lived up to the hype, was bet down to 3 to 5 favoritism, and really ran to that backing. And you could just see this horse striding through the stretch with these powerful loping strides. He's very much a son of Uncle Mo. He really moves like that sire. And while he is stretching out from the 7 furlong distance to the 1.16 here, just based on the visual of that debut and the pedigree influences, he's supposed to get at least this far. We'll see if he's really a true 1.25 horse a little bit later on down the Derby trail, but I think a 1.16 is supposed to be within his wheelhouse. Like I said, there's been a lot of hype around this horse from the start. He cost $2.3 million at auction when he was a 2-year-old. He has been training lights out coming coming into this race. There's a lot of buzz about how well he's been doing out in Southern California in his morning workouts coming in here for Bob Baffert. So I think a lot of people do expect him to deliver like he did on debut in the second career start. And also the stats for Bob Baffert really do back up that viewpoint. We take a look at this DRF formulator fact for Baffert. Now, this is not a big sample, but it is very specific. Over the past 5 years, with male horses in graded stakes races making their second starts going from sprint to routes on dirt, Bob Baffert is 5 for 11, 45%, with an ROI that's just over the positive mark, $2.04. And there are a lot of short prices in the sample. These are horses that are typically getting bet down pretty heavily, kind of like Arabian Night will. But that near 50% win rate says that Bob Baffert typically gets these horses to deliver when they come in with this kind of hype, and he jumps right into graded stakes after a debut win. So I think you can expect Arabian Night to deliver in this Southwest on Saturday. But let's take a look at some of those Brad Cox trained challengers from this race, because Brad Cox has had a lot of success on this Kentucky Derby trail so far, and we'll go through his runners in post position order, beginning with the number 2, Corona Bolt. Like Arabian Night, he is one that is stretching out in distance for the first time. Both of his 2 prior victories have come over sprint distances. And also note that he's had pretty good trips in both of those prior starts, particularly last time. You note those blue color-coded TimeformUS speed figures. That indicates that he really had things his own way on the front end. A clear lead, setting a slow pace, and he was just able to sprint away from that overmatched field through the stretch. But he did run a pretty impressive 1:14 final time figure for that race. That was taken down a little bit due to the slow pace to a 1:06 TimeformUS speed figure, a final number. But he's one that definitely has some potential coming in here. I do view him as a little bit more of a sprint type than I do Arabian Night. Bolt Doro, they can certainly go longer, progeny of that sire, but on the dam side, it's a little bit more sprinter miler pedigree. His one best sibling is a turf horse that really didn't want to go farther than a mile, so I'm a little bit skeptical of Corona Bolt getting this added distance, especially with a likely fast-paced situation. The Brad Cox trained runner drawn just to his outside is the number 3, Jace's Road, and he's another one that could show early speed in this race. He's coming off a gate-to-wire score last time in the Gun Runner at Fairgrounds, and he won that race pretty impressively, drawing off to win by over 5 lengths with a very respectable 1:13 TimeformUS speed figure. That performance was flattered when the third-place finisher determinedly came back to win an allowance race on the LeCompte undercard at Fairgrounds last Saturday. So Jace's Road is coming in off a really solid effort, but he's been a little bit inconsistent so far. Obviously, he didn't show up in that sloppy track Street Sense 2 back. Maybe the track condition is the excuse that day, but he did take that big step forward last time in the Gun Runner. I'm interested to see if he could repeat that speed figure or even improve on it, given that big jump that he took in the last race. And also, he might have to do it from off the pace this time, because it doesn't seem like he's quite quick enough to make the lead here with stretch out speeds like Corona Bolt and Arabian Night in the race. And perhaps the least heralded of the 3 Brad Cox runners is the number 8 Hit Show. We'll take a look at the replay of his last race when he won an optional claiming allowance race at Oaklawn Park in his prior start in the middle of December. And I like the way he finishes up this race. The pace was on the moderate side. He ranged up at the top of the stretch like he was going to win by a length or so, but he really lengthens his stride in the final furlong here. And you can see him just pulling away from the rivals as they come onto the wire. He put in a final 1/8 of a mile in 12-1 this day. So that really bodes well for him stretching out and getting added distances as he goes the mile and a 16th here. Obviously, Hit Show has to get a little bit faster. Didn't very much of a speed figure on debut. And last time, while he did step forward, still hasn't achieved that triple-digit TimeformUS speed figure. So he's going to have to do better to win this race, but he might be one that could complete the exotics if this pace does come apart behind the possible winner, Arabian Night. Let's move on to another horse that would benefit from a hot pace up front. That is the number 7, Red Route 1. And we'll take a look at his race 3 back when he was 3rd in the Breeders' Futurity. And no disgrace finishing 3rd in this race, because the 2 horses that finished ahead of him are pretty talented. One of those being a likely 2-year-old champion, Forte, who went on to win the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. The runner-up in this race, Loggins, is on a lot of people's Kentucky Derby lists, though he might not make that race. He's been sidelined since then, but a horse with a lot of talent, and Red Route 1 closed to be a good third in that race, actually finishing ahead in front of Instant Coffee, the horse that we just saw come back to win the Kentucky Jockey Club and the LeCompte in his 2 subsequent starts for trainer Brad Cox. So the form lines out of that British Futurity are very strong. Now, Red Route 1 has finished off the board in 2 subsequent starts since then, but one of those was the Street Sense, where we already talked about Jace's Road coming out of that race. Just probably didn't handle the slop that day. And then last time, check out that pace figure line and all of those blue color-coded pace figures in the Kentucky Jockey Club. That really worked against horses that were trying to close. And also, Red Route 1 was just stymied in traffic for the entire stretch drive of that race. There's a real argument that he would have won that Kentucky Jockey Club if he had ever found a clear seam to run through in the stretch, but he just got free way too late that day after Instant Coffee had already gotten the jump on him. But I think Red Route 1 did run his race in that Kentucky Jockey Club and is likely to catch a much more favorable pace scenario in this Southwest. So he could be a real danger to the favorite Arabian Night. One more horse to take a look at is the number 1, Sun Thunder. He is the other Ken McPeek runner in this field. We already mentioned Ken McPeek had that likely pace presence, Frosted Departure. Sun Thunder, a bit more of a closer. Let's take a look at his last race when he broke his maiden on New Year's Eve at Oaklawn Park. And he's already in front at this point in the race when they turn into the stretch, but he had made a big move from 8th place around the far turn to get to the front. And by the time they reached the quarter pole, and he draws away from this overmatched field pretty impressively in the stretch of this race. Now, he is stepping up to face a whole world of different quality of animal in here. He was really not beating much in that maiden win last time out, but he is a horse that does have a lot of upside. This is just the 3rd start of his career. I like the way he closed into a slow pace on debut at Churchill Downs, took that logical next step forward to break his maiden going the 2 turns last time, and I like that Ken McPeek is showing that confidence to move him right up out of the maiden company into this graded stakes race. And we'll take a look at a DRF formulator fact for trainer Ken McPeek that says that he does very well with this move. Over the past 5 years, with horses that broke their maidens last time out in dirt route stakes races, he's winning at 25% in a 32-horse sample with a very healthy ROI above $5. So he is winning in this sample at a really healthy clip with some big prices, and Sun Thunder does figure to be a big price in this Southwest Stakes. So let's take a look at my picks here. And I really toyed with putting some bigger prices on top, like the number 7 Red Route 1 or the number 1 Sun Thunder. I think that they're both interesting closers in this race, but at the end of the day, I just settled for Arabian Night. I don't like taking short-priced favorites like this, but I do get the sense that this horse is probably the real deal. He was so impressive first time out. The hype has been right about this horse so far, and I think he's probably going to deliver a nice effort in this Southwest on Saturday. But I would play some exactas and trifectas keying the number 7 Red Route 1 and the number 1 Sun Thunder underneath Arabian Night, because I do think they are the 2 closers that will be most likely to pick up the pieces in this Southwest Stakes on Saturday at Oaklawn Park. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.